of Equity and Student Services. I'll be hosting today's Q&A. Questions were submitted to our district on Monday by parents, students, and community using our Google online form. We appreciate those of you who took the time to provide comments and ask questions using our Google form. Our first question today has to do with the choice of sending students back to school or choosing full-time distance learning. The district will be sending out a survey to parents of our elementary school students to ask whether or not parents would want to return their students to school this semester. We'll have the option of full-time distance learning for those families who choose to have their children remain learning from home. Next Tuesday on October 13th, we'll bring the elementary school waiver to the board meeting for discussion and approval. We then will seek approval from the Tulare County Health Department and the California Department of Health. We hope to bring back our elementary students after Thanksgiving. Parent conferences are in the middle of November, so we need to schedule around conferences and holidays. Another question related to the reopening of school was asking what the district had to do to be ready. The district is prepared to open elementary schools once the waiver is approved by local and state health officials. Our teachers union has asked to bargain the effects of the schedule, and we are currently working with them to identify what effects they wish to bargain. If we are allowed to reopen our secondary schools, which we're currently not, as we're experiencing cases due to COVID-19 in our county, we would need to resurvey parents to determine how many students will be returning to school in order for us to ensure that we can continue for full distance learning. We would then need to make staffing adjustments to provide full-time distance learning for students. Students will be allowed to continue on full distance learning, or if space is available, move to charter homeschool or Visalia Independent Study Charter School, which offers alternative options for students. We also received a question about locating examples of homework assignments so that parents could support their children with homework. The first step in this is really working with your child's teacher so they can explain or provide examples of where you can locate the homework or the assignments for your child. These may be found in textbooks, in Schoology, on other online resources. Your teachers can direct you to the best places to locate these examples, as those would vary by grade level and by subject. The district has also received questions about pro-youth heart care for students during this time, and so we are pleased to introduce Dr. Marie Pinto, CEO of Pro-Youth Heart, as one of our guests today. Welcome, Dr. Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Gridiron.
And so I'd like to start by asking you to explain the current programs for students while we are all on distance learning.
Thank you. Currently, Pro-Youth is providing full-day heart program for all of Visalia Unified students. It is open to all K-12 students. High school is all virtual. K-8 is in person. We are at 4 alternative sites, not on school campuses. And so currently we are assisting with distance learning. My staff is ensuring that all students are on their Zoom meetings with their teachers, and then assisting the other students with their asynchronous work. We break for lunch, we flip, and then those PM students are then put onto their Zoom meetings, and then we assist with asynchronous work after that. After the school day, after 3 o'clock, we then transition to our traditional heart program, where we provide all of our enrichment classes and activities. We are providing all of our activities for our pathways, computer science, ag science, health science, and the arts. And the program runs from 7:45 until 6 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you. Can you tell me about your plans for when elementary students are allowed to return to school on an AB schedule?
Pro-Youth is committed to continue our full-day program, knowing that those PM kids who are not on campus will need a place to go. And so we are committed to continue our full-day heart program. At lunch, transportation will need to be provided to be able to flip those groups to where the PM kids would go to their campus, and any AM student who needed after-school services would then come to an alternative site, and we would continue that full-day program until 6 o'clock. For those PM kids who are on the school site, if facilities were offered to us, then we would be able to do an after-school program on the school site until 6 o'clock for those children that need after-school care.
Thank you. And we would like to thank you for your service and support and your staff for our students during this time, because it's definitely helpful for our students and families, so we definitely appreciate that.
Thank you. It's an honor to be able to service. We just wish we can do more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We also received some questions about the budget and the CARES dollars to support our district during this pandemic. So next, I'd like to welcome Nathan Hernandez, our Chief Financial Officer. So welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Gridiron.
So Nathan, we frequently receive questions about our district's budget. People want to know if our budget is balanced, if we're living within our means. Can you tell us about the budget in a way that we all can understand?
I will attempt to do so. I know there have been lots of questions about the budget this year. It's been a very complicated year for budget development. I will start by saying that as we sit here today, we do have a balanced budget for the 2020-21 school year, and we are living within our means, but that is not the end of the story on this year's budget. We've had in our district a fairly stable budget for the last 6 to 7 years. So last year, when we had an operational deficit, meaning we had more costs, more expenses, than we had money coming in, more revenues. And so we were forced to make cuts to bring our budget back into balance for the school year. So the board had to make some very difficult decisions, and they did, and that was tough. But we were ready to begin the budget development process this year to balance our budget. Then there was the economic shutdown, and we went through probably one of the most complicated budget development seasons that I've had to go through in my 15 years working in school finance. So in other words, it was 2020. Mm-hmm. So to try and put it simply, there are two parts to our budget. There's our revenues or our income, and then there's our expenses, those things that we're responsible to pay for. And just like in home budgeting, we want to have more revenue than we have expenditures. And most of our revenues come from the state of California, and it's driven by the state economy. So if you think of income taxes and sales taxes and those things, we don't have a lot of control over the revenue side of our budget. So we pay attention to what's happening at the state, and this year it was a roller coaster, especially with the timing of it during our budget development process. The other part of our budget, our expenses, we do have some control over, but 80 to 85% of our cost are our personnel. We are a people organization. So when we have to make cuts and reductions, those are tough decisions. And those decisions have to be made before March 15th. And so we know what happened after March 15th. And so that just made the timing of it really difficult. In May, the state gives us an update on their budget and the revenues that they expect for schools. And we use that to develop the rest of our budget. And at that point, the state had some pretty significant cuts, over $23 million to our budget. When we adopted our budget initially in June, it was not balanced. However, the legislature rescinded those cuts that they announced in May. And it's really not simple to explain how they did that. They used reserves and other things. But the result of that was that our funding was held harmless for this school year. And so that rescinded those initial cuts. So in August, we're required to adjust our budget for those changes, and that's called the 45-day revision. And so when we brought those changes back to our board, our budget did come back into balance.
Thank you, Nathan. Can you also give us an update on the CARES funds and how the district is spending those funds to support distance learning, and how those funds will be used to support a hybrid model when students are allowed to return to school?
Yes, so we received about $30 million in CARES funding overall. The majority of those funds to date have been spent on the technology, Chromebooks, iPads, and the software, Schoology and iReady to implement our distance learning platforms. About $12 million has been allocated to those areas so far. We have also allocated funds to school sites to assist with purchasing materials and supplies for students, books for distribution, and other materials. We've also purchased additional instruments and arts and crafts supplies so those things can be given to students while they're distance learning. We've also been preparing for students to return, so we've stocked up on our PPE for both students and for staff. So those are things like gloves and face shields and masks, cleaning and sanitation supplies and equipment so that we can disinfect our classrooms much quicker. Also to clean our restrooms and interior spaces. We have hand sanitizer, and you see signage on a lot of our classrooms directing students on what to do to help with those social distancing cues and things on floors. When we do return to a hybrid model, we expect to have more expenditures on personnel-related type costs. So timesheets for staff doing additional hours. We know that when we have transportation, we're going to have fewer students on a bus, so we're going to have additional bus routes to get kids to school. We're also going to need to have additional monitors for students, so additional time for our staff to watch students when they get to school in the morning to make sure they're following social distancing guidelines, and at lunchtime to make sure that we can feed our students. And so under the hybrid model, much more of our cost will be for those personnel type expenditures.
And one last question. We received questions about Measure A bond dollars, and as I recall, the board decided to hold off on moving forward with issuing the bonds for the 5th high school because the state's bond to provide matching dollars did not pass. Can you elaborate on this and explain how long the board has to make a decision, and is there a time frame for the original bond approval to the state, to the sale of the bond that the district needs to adhere to?
Yes. So earlier this year, the school board did take the action to hold off the design on the 5th high school. As you stated, the state bond that would have provided the matching funds, additional funding for us to build that high school, that bond failed. And there isn't a viable method for us to build that high school design with the funding that we have. So to answer the question about how long the district has to sell the remaining bonds, we just did a bond sale, $35 million for modernization. So we have additional funds on a $105 million bond available. There is no expiration on the authority for the board to issue or to sell those bonds. So that with the passage of that Measure A, they have time to issue those bonds. There's also no cost to property taxpayers. They don't pay on the unsold bonds. They only pay on bonds that are issued. So there is no cost to the taxpayer to have that outstanding authority. We do still need to address the overcrowding at Redwood and the imbalance with the enrollment at Mount Whitney. The 5th high school was intended to balance enrollment, so discussion with the board and the community will be how do we move forward to provide relief for Redwood and to bring balance back to enrollment. That will be a public process. It starts with a review of our enrollment information and the development of options that would be presented to the school board, then taken back out to the community. We started that process actually back in February. We had 2 community forums where we were talking about the high school and design, and then the state bond failed and schools closed, and we focused really on distance learning. So this will be something that will be a focus for the board in January when they do their planning session. So that's the timing.
Well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you and your team for all you do for our district. A lot of hard work there, so we definitely appreciate for the support to our students and staff and families. And so we also have some technical questions regarding computer applications. And so we're inviting Chuck Boone, who's our Director of Technology Services, here to assist with these questions. So, Chuck, Thank you for joining us. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Brandon.
So one parent asked if they could have access to the favorite resources section of the homepage, so they could put a few icons they use very frequently in an easy access location. I know the home screen resets to fixed screen for students. Can you tell us a little bit about the reasoning for that?
Sure. I believe the question is referring to our Clever portal. Students can tag apps and links currently in Clever as favorites by hovering over the app and clicking on the heart icon. That will put them in their favorite resources. Unfortunately, student users can't add other personal content there, though. It is a great idea, and I will share that with Clever as a product enhancement. If you want to save other links to resources and things that students use frequently, students can add them to their My Resources area in Schoology or bookmark them in their Chrome browser, simply by clicking the star icon in the address bar to the right of the website address.
Thank you. And another parent asked if they could be given access to Class Dojo on the laptop. This student doesn't have a cell phone and is not sure where to look for homework after the class ends. So is that possible as a feature?
Sure. Yeah, a great question again. Also, I believe this is a question regarding our handy Clever portal. I have added an app in there to help students access Class Dojo easier, and that wasn't there previously, and I think this is a great suggestion. I'm sure it'll make accessing Class Dojo easier for many students. For follow-up questions regarding Class Dojo, specifically for parent access, I suggest that you please follow up with your student's teacher.
Thank you. And the last question on technology is asking why students' Google accounts are not set up to restricted mode to prevent access from content on certain websites like YouTube.
Sure, another good question. We allow unrestricted mode in YouTube for students to access valuable instructional content their teachers have curated and are assigning to their students to view. Unfortunately, due to YouTube's rating methods and algorithms, it is challenging for teachers to assign quality videos and know what won't end up being blocked for students in restricted mode. We continue to work with our filtering vendor and YouTube as well to improve our capabilities in this area.
And thank you, Chuck, and thank you and your team. I mean, the work that you've done around getting technology and access for our students has been phenomenal, and having our students be able to be online and working is a huge testament to the hard work that you've done as a team, so we definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be able to support that.
Awesome. So one parent asked about student absences. When a student cannot connect due to internet issues, when this occurs, we ask that you email your teachers and let them know so that the student isn't marked absent. If it continues to be an issue, we ask that you continue to work with your sites, and they can reach out to our technology department to make sure that we support with some of the technical issues with being able to access online instruction. There's also a question about Zoom conferences with students and teachers or counselors. How does a parent know when a conference is scheduled with their student? For the most part, you would find this invitation in your student's Schoology account. If you want to be invited for the student meeting with the teacher, please reach out to your teacher or the counselor so that way they can be alerted, or you can be alerted to when those meetings are scheduled so that way you can be invited. We thank you all for joining us for our Q&A today. As a reminder, these sessions are recorded, so you do not need to watch them at the time they're live, because they'll be recorded for you. But we also appreciate your comments and questions, as they're invaluable to our progress as we move forward with supporting our students, staff, and families. Thank you, and have a great day.